Back in 2008, there was a game for the Nintendo DS I was enthralled with. It was the perfect way to pass time, since I was already musically inclined because of instrument lessons, and I found myself spending good chunks playing the same levels over and over again, trying to beat my high score. I found myself struggling with the very last song, the hardest difficulty of Jumpin' Jack Flash. I couldn't tell which order the circles went in because the numbers were unclear, so I searched the internet for a guide on how to get past what I was stuck on. I learned the pattern, and, with as much luck as skill, I passed the song and completed the game. There were, however, different songs at the side of the screen that I knew weren't on the game I played. I paid them no mind, thinking they were fan content, not realising the subtle differences in appearance between what I played and those videos. Nowadays, I kick myself somewhat for not following my curiosity back in 2008, but had that have happened, I'm sure my standing in this community would be very different than it's turned out, mainly because I wouldn't wish 8-year-old me on anyone. Either way, my interest in the game waned and I moved on, but it always kept a place in my heart as one of my favourite ways to kill time. In 2014, however, I was browsing the Twitch listings and stumbled across something that looked completely different, yet incredibly similar to that game from all those years ago. I couldn't believe that it could still have a following, let alone have such a high level of play. I was instantly hooked again, immediately downloaded the game I had found, and decided to do a little more research to learn more about the particular players that had caught my eye. And I discovered something. The game doesn't have to look like this. You can make the game look almost however you want it to without affecting gameplay at all, maybe even enhancing it. In fact, many players have their own unique skins. So after downloading and trying a few, I decided I wanted to make one for myself. My own skin. My own visual aesthetic. Sadly, a lot of the early few I made were lost to time, but they were incredibly basic and incredibly rustic. It doesn't take a lot to create your own skin, just a little basic knowledge, curiosity, and some trial and error. A small dash of creative thinking is somewhat useful too. Having access to any free, mid-level image editor will help, as long as it supports transparency. The first thing to do is download a skin. We already have Yugen, but another thing to do is download the default skin from the website. It may already be in the game, however it's not easily accessible, which is useless for the purpose we need it for. Once you have it imported, open up the skin folder and take a look around. The sheer number of assets, plus the fact there are 2 copies, may be overwhelming, but don't let it fool you. A lot of these assets are useless to gameplay, and the extra copy with @2 on its name is just a higher resolution version of the same asset. The reason I say to download a skin is so that it can act as a base. It's useful to have a base skin you can edit assets of instead of saving files into a dry folder, since this way you know what you've replaced and what is still to be worked on or changed. Maybe you already like some of the assets of the base and would just like to change some minor details. I'll put some places to find skins in the description, but the recently reopened Skin House and the Osu Skins subreddits are great places, plus the skinning subforum is always a good place to check. Regardless of whether you're using a base or going in fresh, you still need to know what you need for a skin. Learning which files are what is a fun process, with some potentially interesting results. This is mostly where the trial and error comes in. If you're impatient and just want to know which assets affect gameplay, there's a skin downloaded in the description with solely gameplay related assets in it, along with a list of them in case you accidentally delete one. To create a unique skin, there are 2 common methods. The first, mixing, involves taking assets you like out of one skin and placing them into another. For example, if you like a certain skin but prefer a different skin's cursor, you find the cursor in the skin folder, copy it, and paste it into the skin you like. Then, pressing the hotkey Ctrl-Alt-Shift-S in-game, refresh the current skin you have selected, changing the loaded cursor. You can repeat this process with anything in the skin, and with multiple skins at once. It's useful here to have a base skin that you can replace the assets in, rather than dumping into an empty folder, because at some point you might find you forgot something by accident. It's simple enough to do, easy to repeat a little at a time, and still nets you a unique product at the end of it. The only catch being you could get some interesting combo number spacing, but a simple edit to a line in Skin only fixes that. The second method involves creating assets from scratch. This sounds pretty daunting, but it's nowhere near as bad as you think. This is the part where creativity comes in, since you can trial and error your way through the creation process to, again, achieve some interesting results. For example, there's more than one way to create a hit circle. The easiest thing to do would be to use a circle tool to create a large white-filled circle, but that's just boring. You can use a brush to achieve the same result, and using an eraser in the middle of this circle makes a ring that fades into transparency. Experiment, play around, see what interesting types of hit circle you can make and see how they feel to play with. You might discover you like something you made that you wouldn't find on any other skin, or you could choose to make a new asset inspired by one you already like, but it's too thick or too opaque. The same can be said for cursors. There's more than one way to create a small circle, and definitely more than one way to style it. You can make it glow, make it bright, or you could even decide to not have a circular cursor at all. Have some fun, Let your creative juices flow and enjoy the process. A lot of skin-specific settings are included within the skin.ini file, which I briefly mentioned earlier. The layout might be a little intimidating at first, but don't worry, almost everything is self-explanatory. The main things you need to worry about are cursor rotate and cursor trail rotate, for if you want your cursor to slowly spin at all times, cursor expand for if you want your cursor to expand every time you click, for as long as you hold the button. Combo colors are contained in this file and are changeable here using RGB numbers. For some reason, the game will always start from combo 2, so make sure to have whichever color you want as your first to appear set as that one. You can also change the color of your sliders and the color of the borders in the same way. Any other setting is mostly irrelevant, but if you want to know what they do, I'll link to the skin.ini wiki page in the description. One thing I suppose that should be contained within this file and isn't, is the cursor trail length. Instead, if cursor middle is in your skin file, the cursor trail would be long like in the current default skin, and if not, it'll be a shorter length as is commonly seen elsewhere. This information was something I was missing for ages, as you can probably tell by my first attempt. You can do almost anything with the skin. The hit circles, overlays, and everything else gameplay-wise are your playground, but what makes a good skin? The answer to this seems to have changed a little over the years, as skinning tastes and map design have changed. What was popular years ago now looks clunky and outdated, the preferences of older players not matching up completely to the newer generation. The default skin, as I mentioned earlier, used to look like this. It was forced, so map design took into account these obstructive scroll bursts and worked around them, sometimes using them to obscure notes and sometimes making sure notes were stacked but still readable via the approach circle. Skins, when introduced, slowly gained popularity but never really strayed away from this default styling. You can see this quite clearly when playing older maps that include a map skin, most notably because of the 300 bursts always being opaque. This actually used to be a slight taboo. Removing opaque 300s was frowned upon because it removed a lot of the reading difficulty from maps, with some going as far as to call it cheating. Skins back at this time were simply for aesthetic purposes. There was no real advantage to having a skin over not. It was all about how you wanted the game to look. Slowly though, through advancements of player performance and mapping difficulty, it became more and more acceptable to have transparent 300s. Skins also started to move away from opacity and into far more open designs to aid with reading and recognition of circles. The center of hit circles started to become completely transparent, and they started to shrink further and further into the overlay before disappearing completely in some cases. This meant skins had moved away from purely aesthetic values and started to become aids to gameplay. Since mid-2013, skins have started to become cleaner with less fancy graphics or small details, and arguably more boring as a result. Since gameplay is the value, it's much more common to find a plain hit circle than a detailed one. Something that has started appearing again, however, is two-tone assets, such as an approach circle that fades between two slightly different shades, or two slightly different colours. I'm not a fan of it in gameplay, but it must work for some people, or else it wouldn't see use. Which brings me to my final point, and my answer to the question: anything makes a good skin. It all depends on what you value as a player, whether that's helping you recognise the circle's locations and rhythms, or letting you enjoy playing what can be a pretty game. If you're going for enjoyment or challenge, there are a lot of skins that will help you do just that. I believe learning how to make or mix your own skin is incredibly important and widely overlooked just because of how daunting it may seem. It can help you make minor changes to how your skin plays that could make the difference between able to read a pattern or losing focus and completely whiffing. Skinning most definitely isn't just for the elite graphic designers. Go and play around in a folder and see how much of a mess you can make, and enjoy the process. And remember, please enjoy game.